Hello and welcome to my channel. As you may notice, it's not the usual voice that you used to hear on my YouTube shorts, because this is my real voice. So let's begin of the basic functions of the DSLR. So let's begin. On the top, you have your on-off switch and then your mode wheel, where you have manual mode, aperture priority, time priority, and program automatic. So AV is basically when you set your aperture. Let's go into it. So here, as you can see, I can set the aperture and the camera is going to set the shutter speed. Time priority is the other way around. You adjust the shutter speed and the camera is going to set a shutter or an aperture that it thinks that the picture is correctly exposed. So there you go. And then we have program automatic. So the camera is adjusting the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. Three modes are dependent of the metering method. So more on that later. So let's go back onto manual mode. So there you go. So here we have the shutter speed. Basically, the shutter speed is a door for the light. So how long the sensor is exposed to light. If you want to freeze an object, you're going to use a high shutter speed. But if you want trailing, start rails, if you want movement, you're going to use a low shutter speed. There you go. So that's what the shutter speed does. The next one is your aperture. The aperture is basically also a door, but it's continuous. If you set it to f25, it's going to be really close. So with that setting, you will be able to adjust how blurry or how much bokeh you will have behind your subject. So if you want bokeh behind the subject, you're going to select a really open aperture. I'm going to set it 18mm to have even more open. There you go. I set it to the most open aperture. So if I stand on the front of the lens and focus on myself, behind me it's going to be blurry. I'm going to show you what it does. So let's set it to f25 and then I'm going to press the simulation button. Let me turn around the camera. There you go. I turned around the camera. So now I'm going to adjust. So there we go. Now I'm going to press the simulation button. As you can see, in the middle, let's zoom a bit. There you go. The focus. If I press on the simulation button, you can see in the middle, the aperture is closing. So f25 is really close. Next to it, we have the ISO. The ISO is basically the sensitivity of the sensor. So if you want to shoot in low light conditions, but you can't use a high shutter speed, increase the ISO. So if you double that, you can double that. So if you put ISO 200, you can shoot then at 125th of a second. And if you put ISO 400, you will be able to shoot at 250th of a second. So there you go. And underneath what you have is like what the camera thinks the picture is correctly exposed. So if I'm going to try to expose that picture so the camera is happy, so now the camera thinks the picture is correctly exposed. But this one is also dependent of the metering method. So I'm going to show you that later. So you can use that to estimate if a picture is correctly exposed, but use the histogram to be sure. I have a complete video on the histogram on my channel, what it does and how it works. Underneath, you have the color profiles. That's where you can find black and white. Yeah, although the camera takes what it thinks is the adequate mode to use, Second one, standard, portrait, landscape, neutral, faithful, monochrome, that's black and white, and that's custom. But the most that I use is auto or black and white. The other ones I don't really use them because I do all the work in post-production. So there you go. Next to it you have your white balance. You have auto, daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten light, fluorescent light, flash, and custom. That's where you're going to set a custom white balance. Let's go back to automatic because the camera is pretty good at defining the white balance. So next to it, here you have your autofocus mode, but the names will vary by brand. On Canon, it's one shot, and then you have some others, one shot, IA focus, and IA servo. Some are better to focus on moving objects, and some are better for something else. I'm going to make a video about that too. Over here, you have the manual selection for the autofocus. So if you put the autofocus point here, it's going to focus there. If you put it in the middle, it's going to focus there. If you put it here, it's going to focus there. So there you go. Next to that, you have your mirroring methods. That's what I was talking about. So if you take, for example, this one, the centered weighted average, so the camera is going to take an average of the light conditions in the middle of the picture or in the center. And the other ones, you have some other ones, you have the spot metering, is going to take a really specific area in the picture, so around 2%. Here you have the partial metering method, which is good for objects which are backlit. And the last one is evaluative metering, ideal for most scenes and also useful for backlit situations. So there you go, we have this one. Now let's go to the drive mode. So if you go to the first one, we have single shooting, then you have continuous shooting, then here you have single silent shooting, there you have silent continuous shooting, self timer 10 seconds or with the remote, and the self timer 2 seconds. And then here you have self timer but continuous shooting. Here you can set when the picture is shot. So here the camera is going to automatically make a picture every 5 seconds. So there you go, we have covered that. Here, that's a really cool feature, the image quality. If you put it on RAW, what's awesome about RAW is if the camera messes up the white balance, or you shot a picture in black and white, so I would like to have that picture in color. Just go in your editing software like Lightroom and bam, the colors are back. So that's awesome. So also what's awesome is if you're overexposing a bit the picture, you can get that back in Lightroom. But don't think if you expose it too much and the sky is blown out, then it's game over. You're not going to get that back. So next to it, you have RAW and JPEG, and then you have the various compression modes, but I never use them. I use RAW the most of the time, or JPEG if I just want to shoot a snapshot of something or the vacation. So I think we are done. There's something I would like to add. Is here you have the button to turn on live view, and then I think we are done. We did a thorough tour of my DSLR, which is a 750D by Canon. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and maybe browse the channel if you want more information about Photoshop and photography. See you in the next one.